Ambassador Jake Morrison walked through the long hallways of the Galactic Council building. His black shoes made soft sounds on the smooth metal floor. The walls were made of some alien material that changed colors as he passed by. Red, blue, green, then back to silver. After 3 years of coming here, Jake still found it amazing. Behind him, Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes carried a small bag filled with documents and data tablets. She wore the same dark blue uniform that all human diplomats used when meeting with the Council. Her brown hair was pulled back in a neat way, and her green eyes looked around at everything with interest. The hallway was full of different alien beings. Jake nodded politely to a tall, thin creature with 4 arms and purple skin. The being looked down at him with what might have been a smile, though it was hard to tell with aliens. Jake had learned that being friendly usually worked well with host species. "Good morning, Ambassador Kethai," Jake said to a floating blob of orange jelly. The translator device in his ear turned the alien's response into English. "Good morning, human Jake. Another day of talking about boring trade rules, yes?" Jake smiled and nodded. "That's what we're here for." They walked past a group of lizard-like aliens who were making clicking sounds at each other. Jake had learned that clicking sounds meant they were either very happy or very angry. Since their tails were not moving much, he guessed they were happy. The main council chamber was huge. The ceiling was so high that Jake could barely see the top. Hundreds of seats were arranged in circles, with each species having their own section. The humans had been given 12 seats in the back, near where the newer species usually sat. Jake took his usual seat in the front row of the human section. Lisa sat beside him and opened her bag to get out her note-taking materials. Around them, other species were doing the same thing. The Zentari Empire had the biggest section with over 200 seats. Their leader, Council Speaker Vexhai, sat in a special chair that was raised higher than all the others. Vexhai was impressive to look at. She had 4 arms, each one as thick as Jake's leg. Her skin was dark purple with silver lines running through it. Her head was larger than a human head with 6 eyes arranged in 2 rows. When she looked at Jake, which she did often, all 6 eyes would focus on him at once. Jake had learned that Vexhai found humans interesting. Not in a good way or a bad way, just interesting. Like how a person might find a talking dog interesting. Humans were new to the galaxy, and most of the older species thought they were cute but not very important. The Korthak hegemony sat to the right of the Zentari. They were big, heavy creatures that looked like a mix between a bear and a lizard. Their leader, Hegemon Brutok, was even bigger than the others. He had gray skin covered in thick scales, and his mouth was full of sharp teeth. When Brutok spoke, his voice was so deep that Jake could feel it in his chest. Other species filled the rest of the chamber. The Veltar looked like giant insects with too many legs. The Ashanti were small, gray beings with huge black eyes. The Rokari were made of what looked like living rock. Each species had their own way of sitting, talking, and moving. A soft chime filled the chamber, which meant the meeting was about to start. All the different conversations stopped, and everyone looked toward the center of the room where a large screen appeared in the air. "Today we will discuss several important matters," Vexhai announced. Her voice came from speakers placed around the chamber, translated into each species' language. First, the trade agreement between the Ashanti Federation and the Veltar Collective. Second, the territorial dispute between the Rokari Empire and the Zentari colonies in the outer spiral. Third, the Korthak hegemony's request regarding certain star systems. Jake felt Lisa shift in her seat beside him. The star systems Vexhai mentioned were the ones where humans had built colonies. 3 worlds with about 4 million human settlers total. Jake had been expecting this topic to come up, but he had hoped it would take longer. Brutok stood up from his seat. Even sitting down, he was taller than most species when they stood up. When he was actually standing, he was huge. His voice rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder. "Honored council members," Brutok began, "the Korthak hegemony brings before you a matter of great importance to galactic security and prosperity." Jake kept his face calm and interested. He had learned that showing too much emotion during council meetings was considered rude by most species. Humans were supposed to be the polite ones, the ones who listened carefully and spoke softly. The star systems known to humans as New Boston, Liberty Point and Haven's Rest contain resources that are vital to galactic stability, Brutok continued. Our surveys have shown large deposits of quantum crystals, rare metals, and energy-rich gases. These resources are too important to be left in the hands of a single species, especially one so new to galactic civilization. Several other species made sounds of agreement. The Veltar clicked their mandibles, which was their way of clapping. Some of the smaller species nodded their heads or moved their appendages in ways that meant yes in their cultures. Jake felt his jaw tightened slightly, but he kept his expression neutral. Beside him, Lisa continued taking notes, but he noticed that she was pressing her stylus a little harder against the tablet than usual. The Korthak hegemony proposes that these human colonies be relocated to other suitable worlds, Brutok went on. We will, of course, provide assistance with the moving process. In return, these valuable star systems will be placed under the protection of the hegemony, ensuring that their resources benefit all species in the galaxy. More sounds of agreement came from around the chamber. Jake noticed that the Zentari section was particularly enthusiastic. Vexhai herself was nodding with all 6 eyes focused on Brutok. This is, naturally, just a suggestion, Brutok added, though his tone made it clear it was anything but a suggestion. We hope that our human friends will see the wisdom in this arrangement. After all, cooperation and sacrifice for the greater good are the principles upon which this council was founded. Jake stood up slowly. Around the chamber, hundreds of alien eyes turned to look at him. He was probably the smallest being in the room and certainly the youngest species represented. When he spoke, his voice would be translated into dozens of different languages and heard by creatures who had been traveling between stars since before humans learned to make fire. Honored Council Speaker, Jake said, his voice clear and respectful. The human delegation appreciates the hegemon's concern for galactic stability. He paused for a moment, choosing his words carefully. This was the part where he was supposed to be diplomatic, where he was supposed to find a way to agree with the powerful species while protecting human interests, where he was supposed to be polite. However, Jake continued, these colonies represent the homes of 4 million human beings. They have built lives, families, and communities on these worlds. Many of their children were born there and have never seen Earth. Brutok made a sound that might have been laughter. Surely the humans understand that individual concerns must give way to the greater good of all species. Of course, Jake replied, with a smile that looked genuine. Humans have always believed in cooperation and peaceful resolution of conflicts. We simply ask for time to discuss this proposal with our government and to work out the details of any potential relocation. Vexhai leaned forward in her chair. How much time does the human delegation require? Jake looked thoughtful, as if he was carefully considering the question. Perhaps 6 months to begin the process, and 18 months for complete relocation, assuming suitable alternative worlds can be found. Brutok's expression darkened. That seems excessive. Our surveys indicate that human extraction of resources has already caused significant environmental damage. Every day of delay increases the risk to galactic security. We understand the urgency, Jake said, his tone still polite and reasonable. But surely the council recognizes that moving 4 million people cannot be done overnight. Around the chamber, other species began to murmur among themselves. Jake could hear fragments of translated conversation. Some species thought the humans were being reasonable, others thought they were stalling. Lisa finished writing something on her tablet and showed it to Jake. The message was simple. Colony reports incoming, urgent. Jake read the message and nodded slightly. Then he looked back up at the council, with the same calm, diplomatic expression he had worn for 3 years. The human delegation will, of course, give this proposal our most serious consideration, he said. We hope to have a response within the next few days. The meeting continued, with other topics, but Jake's mind was already elsewhere. Something was happening in the colonies. Something urgent enough that the commanders there were breaking communication protocols to contact him during a council session. As the session ended and the various species began to file out of the chamber, Jake gathered his materials with the same careful, methodical approach he always used. To anyone watching, he looked like the same polite, slightly overwhelmed human ambassador who had been coming to these meetings for 3 years. But Lisa, who had worked with Jake since first contact, noticed something different. There was a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there that morning. 3 days had passed since the council meeting. Jake Morrison sat in his office at the Human Embassy, staring at the reports on his desk. The papers were covered with numbers, but the numbers told a terrible story. Lisa Hayes walked into the office carrying a hot cup of coffee and a grim expression. She set the coffee on Jake's desk and sat down in the chair across from him. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. "How many?" Jake asked finally. "The latest count is 8,412, Lisa replied. Her voice was steady, but Jake could see the anger in her eyes. Most of them were civilians, families, children. Jake picked up one of the reports. It was from New Boston, the largest of the 3 human colonies. The paper had pictures attached to it, pictures of burning buildings, pictures of destroyed schools and hospitals, pictures of things that Jake did not want to think about. "What about the other colonies?" Jake asked. "Liberty Point lost about 3,000 people before they could evacuate. Haven's Rest got most of their people out, but the Korthak destroyed everything they left behind. Homes, factories, farms, everything." Jake stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see alien beings walking through the embassy district. They looked peaceful, going about their daily business as if nothing had happened, as if thousands of humans had not died 3 days ago. "The Korthak are calling it a preliminary resource survey," Lisa continued. "They say the orbital bombardment was necessary to clear away obstructions before their mining equipment could land." "Obstructions," Jake repeated. The word tasted bitter in his mouth. A soft chime sounded from Jake's desk. It meant someone was calling on the secure communication line. Jake walked back and pressed a button. The face of Admiral Karen Blake appeared on the screen. She was calling from the Human Fleet headquarters, which was several star systems away from the council station. "Ambassador Morrison," Admiral Blake said. Her voice was tight with controlled anger. "I assume you've seen the reports." "Yes, Admiral, all of them. My ships are ready to move, just give the word." Jake looked at Lisa, then back at the screen. "Admiral, we need to follow proper procedures. I'm calling for an emergency council session." Admiral Blake's expression did not change, but Jake could see the frustration in her eyes. "Jake, they murdered our people. They bombed civilian targets, children's schools, for God's sake." "I know," Jake said quietly. "But we have to try the diplomatic route first. The diplomatic route got 8,000 people killed. The diplomatic route is what separates us from them." Admiral Blake was quiet for several seconds. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "How long do I wait? Give me one chance with the council. If they won't act, then we do this our way." After the call ended, Jake sat back down at his desk. Lisa was looking at him with an expression he could not quite read. "Do you really think the council will help?" she asked. Jake picked up his coffee and took a sip. It was cold now, but he drank it anyway. "No," he said, "but we have to give them the chance to do the right thing." 2 hours later, Jake and Lisa were walking through the council building again. But this time, things were different. Jake's steps were quicker, more purposeful. His usual friendly nods to other species were shorter, less warm. Lisa noticed that several aliens looked at them with what might have been sympathy, but most seemed to avoid eye contact entirely. The emergency session was being held in a smaller chamber than the main council hall. Only about half of the species had sent representatives. Jake was not surprised. Emergency sessions about the problems of minor species were rarely well attended. HFY was there, of course. As council speaker, she had to attend all emergency sessions. Brutok was also present, looking as massive and intimidating as always. A few other species had sent representatives, but the chamber felt empty compared to the regular meetings. Jake took his seat and placed a data tablet on the desk in front of him. Lisa sat beside him and opened her note-taking materials. Around the chamber, other species were settling into their seats and preparing for the session. HFY called the meeting to order with the same soft chime that was used in the main chamber. "This emergency session has been requested by the human delegation regarding recent events in the outer spiral colonies." Jake stood up. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly through the chamber, but it was different from 3 days ago. It was colder, more direct. Honored council members, Jake began. 3 days ago, the Korthak hegemony launched unprovoked attacks on 3 human colony worlds. These attacks resulted in the deaths of over 8,000 human civilians, including children. Brutok immediately stood up. I object to the humans' characterization of legitimate resource surveys as attacks. The Korthak hegemony was conducting authorized preliminary operations. Authorized by whom? Jake asked. His tone was polite, but there was something sharp underneath it. By the right of galactic security, Brutok replied. These resources are vital to the stability of all species. Jake activated his data tablet. The chamber's main screen lit up with images from the colonies, pictures of destroyed cities, videos of human civilians running from orbital bombardment, audio recordings of children screaming. Several species in the chamber made uncomfortable sounds. The Ashanti delegation turned their large black eyes away from the screen. Even some of the Zentari looked disturbed. These are the obstructions that the Korthak found it necessary to clear, Jake said. His voice was steady, but everyone in the chamber could feel the anger beneath it. Regrettable, Brutok said, though he did not sound like he regretted anything. But necessary for the greater good. The greater good, Jake repeated. He looked around the chamber, making eye contact with each delegation. Is this what the council considers the greater good? The murder of children to make mining operations more convenient? HFY leaned forward in her chair. Ambassador Morrison, while these events are certainly unfortunate, we must remember that the Korthak hegemony has legitimate claims to these resources. Perhaps if the human colonies had relocated as requested, this tragedy could have been avoided. Jake felt something cold settle in his chest. Around the chamber, he could see other species nodding in agreement. The Veltar were clicking their mandibles softly, which meant they were pleased. Some of the smaller species looked uncomfortable, but none of them spoke up. So the council's position, Jake said slowly, is that this is humanity's fault for not abandoning our homes quickly enough. The council's position, HFY replied, is that all species must sometimes make sacrifices for galactic stability. Jake looked at Lisa. She had stopped taking notes and was staring at the other delegations, with an expression of pure disbelief. When she looked back at Jake, he could see that she had reached the same conclusion he had. I see, Jake said. He gathered his materials from the desk and stood up. In that case, the human delegation withdraws its request for council intervention. HFY blinked all 6 eyes in surprise. Ambassador Morrison, surely you don't intend to abandon diplomatic solutions. Jake looked at her for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but somehow it filled the entire chamber. Council Speaker, for 3 years, humanity has participated in this body with respect and patience. We believed in the principles you claim to uphold. We trusted in galactic law and the protection of civilization. He paused and looked around the chamber again. This time his gaze made several species uncomfortable. We followed your rules. We accepted your guidance. We tried to be good galactic citizens. And when our people were murdered, you told us it was our own fault for not moving fast enough. Jake picked up his data tablet and walked toward the exit. Lisa followed him. At the door, Jake stopped and turned back to the chamber. You have taught us a valuable lesson today, he said. You have shown us that the only protection for humanity is the protection we provide for ourselves. As they left the chamber, Jake could hear the other species beginning to talk among themselves. Some sounded concerned, others sounded dismissive. None of them sounded like they understood what had just happened. In the hallway outside, Lisa walked beside Jake in silence for several minutes. Finally, she spoke. What do we do now? Jake pulled out his personal communicator and opened a secure channel. After a moment, Admiral Blake's face appeared on the small screen. Admiral, Jake said, the Council has declined to take action regarding the Korthak attacks. Admiral Blake nodded grimly. I was afraid of that. What are your orders, Ambassador? Jake looked at Lisa, then back at the communicator. When he spoke, his voice was calm and clear. Execute operation, polite response. Admiral Blake smiled for the first time since the attacks. Copy that, Ambassador. Operation polite response is authorized. After the call ended, Lisa looked at Jake with curiosity. I've never heard of Operation Polite Response. Jake continued walking toward the human embassy. That's because we've never needed it before. For 3 years we've been playing by their rules, following their laws, accepting their limitations. We've been polite. And now? Jake's expression was cold as they entered the embassy building. Now they're going to learn the difference between humans being polite and humans being weak. In the council chamber they had just left, HFY was addressing the remaining delegations. Jake Morrison stood at the podium in the main council chamber. 2 days had passed since the emergency session, and word had spread that the humans had requested another meeting. This time, nearly every species had sent representatives. The chamber was fuller than Jake had ever seen it. But something was different about Jake today. His usual diplomatic smile was gone. His posture was straighter, more military than diplomatic. Beside him, Lisa Hayes stood with her hands behind her back, looking more like a soldier than a note-taking aide. Around the chamber, hundreds of alien beings watched the two humans with curiosity. Most of them expected another plea for help, another attempt at diplomatic begging. The humans had learned their place in the galactic order. Now they would accept it. HFY called the session to order. The human delegation has requested this assembly. Ambassador Morrison, you may proceed. Jake looked around the chamber slowly. His gaze moved from section to section, making eye contact with delegates from dozens of different species. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but carried an edge that made several aliens shift uncomfortably in their seats. Honored council members, Jake began. 2 days ago, this body made its position clear regarding the murder of human civilians. You told us that the deaths of 8,000 innocent people was acceptable for the greater good of galactic stability. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some species sounded uncomfortable. Others sounded impatient, as if they wanted Jake to get to the point. You taught us a valuable lesson, Jake continued. You showed us that the only species we can truly rely on is ourselves. So we have decided to share some information with you. Information about what humanity has been doing for the past 3 years. Lisa stepped forward and activated a holographic projector. The air above the center of the chamber filled with images and data streams. What the aliens saw made many of them lean forward in their seats. The first image showed a detailed map of the Zentari Empire. But this was not an ordinary map. It showed military installations, fleet positions, defensive capabilities, and weak points. Every major world, every important facility, every strategic location was marked and analyzed. Captain Bobby Martinez leads our intelligence division, Jake said conversationally. He has been very busy learning about our galactic neighbors. The image changed to show the Korthak hegemony. Again, the level of detail was incredible. Patrol routes, supply lines, communication networks, command structures. Everything was there, analyzed and categorized with frightening precision. Brutok stood up from his seat, his massive form radiating anger. This is espionage. This is a violation of galactic law. Jake looked at him without any expression. Galactic law did not protect our children. We decided to protect ourselves. The images continued to change. Every major species in the council was represented. The Veltar Collective, the Ashanti Federation, the Rokari Empire. All of them had been studied, mapped, and analyzed down to the smallest detail. Dr. Amanda Foster runs our xenobiology research team, Jake said as the display showed biological data about each species. She has made some fascinating discoveries about the unique characteristics of our galactic neighbors. The chamber fell silent as delegates realized what they were seeing. Detailed analysis of their species' physiologies, including weaknesses, vulnerabilities, and potential pressure points. Information that could be used to develop targeted weapons or biological agents. HFY's forearms trembled slightly. How Long have you been gathering this information? Since the day after first contact, Jake replied. We believed in diplomacy, but we are not stupid. We prepared for the possibility that diplomacy might fail. Lisa activated another set of displays. These showed economic data, trade routes, resource dependencies, financial networks, and economic vulnerabilities for every major galactic power. Commander Rick Sullivan wanted to use this information 18 months ago, Jake said. When the Zentari began restricting human trade access, Colonel Susan Walsh had to talk him out of it. More images appeared. Military analysis of every major fleet in the galaxy. Ship designs, weapon systems, tactical doctrines, and strategic weaknesses. The humans had been studying everyone. General Pete Hawkins has been planning contingency operations since month 6 of first contact, Jake continued. He was very disappointed when I told him to keep playing nice. Around the chamber, delegates were frantically activating their personal communicators trying to contact their home governments. The scope of human intelligence gathering was beyond anything they had imagined. The Ashanti delegate, a small gray being with large black eyes, spoke up in a high, nervous voice. This level of surveillance is impossible. Our security measures would have detected such activities. Jake looked at the Ashanti delegate with something that might have been pity. Your security measures were designed to detect threats from known galactic species. You were not looking for humans because you did not consider us dangerous. Lisa touched her control pad, and new images filled the display. These showed human operatives in various alien locations. Humans working as trade representatives, cultural, exchange students, maintenance workers, and tourists. All of them had been gathering intelligence. For 3 years you welcomed us into your worlds, Jake said. You showed us your facilities during cultural exchange programs. You hired human workers because we were cheap and eager to please. You let us attend your military academies as observers. The images showed humans in Korthak military installations, Zentari research facilities, Veltar manufacturing plants, and Ashanti communication centers. They had been everywhere, watching everything, learning everything. We have been very polite guests, Jake said. We said thank you, we followed your rules, and we took very detailed notes. Brutak's voice rumbled through the chamber like an earthquake. You cannot threaten the entire council. We have fleets, armies, weapons that can destroy entire star systems. Jake looked at him with calm eyes. Hegemon Brutak, your species has a fascinating weakness. Your gravity-dependent physiology makes you vulnerable to specific types of electromagnetic interference. Your ships use a particular type of armor that becomes brittle when exposed to certain frequency combinations. The display showed detailed, technical diagrams of Korthak ships and equipment. Every design flaw, every weak point, every potential failure mode was highlighted and explained. Your homeworld's orbital defense network has 17 critical points of failure, Jake continued. Dr. Foster's team has also developed a biological agent that would make your species very sick, but would not kill you. We are not monsters, after all. The chamber erupted in noise. Delegates were shouting, demanding explanations, making threats, and calling for security. Jake stood calmly at the podium, waiting for the chaos to die down. When the noise finally subsided, Jake continued, as if nothing had happened. The Zentari Empire relies heavily on automated systems, he said, looking directly at Vexhai. Your computer networks are very sophisticated, but they all use the same basic architecture. Lieutenant Colonel Jerry Watson's engineering team has found some interesting ways to interact with those systems. The display showed Zentari computer systems, with detailed analysis of their security protocols, access points, and control mechanisms. Your 6 eyes give you excellent vision, but they also make you sensitive to specific light frequencies, Jake added. Nothing permanent, of course, just very uncomfortable. Species after species was analyzed in devastating detail. The Veltar's exoskeleton could be weakened by particular chemical compounds. The Rokari's rock-like bodies could be destabilized by sonic resonance. The Ashanti's large brains made them vulnerable to focused electromagnetic fields. This is madness, Vexahai, said her voice shaking. You cannot have this much information about everyone. Actually, we can, Jake replied. And we do. For 3 years, you treated us like harmless children. You let us wander around your civilizations with our wide eyes and eager questions. You never thought to wonder what we were really doing. Lisa activated one final display. This one showed something that made the entire chamber fall silent. It was a real-time tactical display of the current locations of every major fleet in the galaxy. But overlaid on the display were small red dots, hundreds of them positioned near every important military formation. These red dots represent human assets currently in position near your fleets, Jake explained. Some are ships, some are stationed personnel, some are devices that were placed during friendly visits and maintenance exchanges. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. The humans had not just been gathering intelligence, they had been positioning themselves for action. We tried being polite, Jake said. We tried following your rules. We tried trusting your systems. And when our people were murdered, you told us it was our fault. He paused and looked around the chamber one more time. Politeness did not protect our children. Your laws did not prevent genocide. Your council voted to blame the victims instead of punishing the killers. Jake gathered his materials and prepared to leave the podium. So we have decided to stop being polite. From now on, we will be honest instead. As Jake and Lisa walked toward the exit, the chamber remained in stunned silence. The chaos in the council chamber was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Delegates were shouting into their communicators in dozens of different languages. Emergency alarms were ringing from personal devices as reports came in from across the galaxy. Defense systems were failing. Communication networks were down. Fleet commanders were reporting strange malfunctions. Jake Morrison stood calmly at the podium, watching the panic spread through the chamber like wildfire. Beside him, Lisa Hayes checked her data tablet and nodded slightly. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Vexhai struggled to maintain order, her 6 eyes darting between different sections of the chamber. "Ambassador Morrison," she called, out, her voice cutting through the noise. "What have you done?" Jake looked at her with the same calm expression he had worn throughout his presentation. "We have demonstrated the difference between human politeness and human weakness. You seem to have confused the two." Brutok was receiving urgent reports from his military commanders. His massive frame shook with rage as he realized the scope of what was happening. "Our fleets are reporting complete system failures," he roared. "This is an act of war." "No," Jake replied quietly. "This is a demonstration. An act of war would look very different." Lisa touched her tablet and spoke into a small microphone. "Major Tony Clark, you are authorized to proceed with Precision Strike Package Alpha." The main display in the chamber changed to show the Korthak battle fleet that was still positioned in human space. The ships were massive, heavily armed vessels that had been used to bomb human colonies just days before. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, one by one, the ships simply stopped working. The first ship lost power to its engines. Then its weapons went dark. Its shields collapsed. Emergency systems failed. Within minutes, the massive warship was drifting helplessly through space, completely powerless. The same thing happened to the second ship. Then the third. Then all of them. "What is happening to our ships?" Brutok demanded, his voice filled with disbelief. "Commodore Helen Barnes sends her regards," Jake said conversationally. "She has been working on this project for 2 years. Small devices almost impossible to detect that can disrupt the specific types of systems your ships use." The display showed Korthak crew members evacuating their ships in emergency pods. The life support systems were failing, but slowly enough to give everyone time to escape. No one was dying, but the entire battle fleet was now completely useless. "Your people will be picked up by rescue ships within a few hours," Jake added. "We are not interested in killing anyone unnecessarily." Around the chamber, other delegates were receiving similar reports. Centauri orbital defense platforms had gone offline. Veltar communication satellites were broadcasting nothing but static. Ashanti research stations were experiencing total computer failures. The Ashanti delegate stood up, his large black eyes wide with fear. "Our deep space monitoring network has completely shut down. How is this possible?" Lieutenant Colonel Jerry, Watson's engineering teams have been very busy, Jake explained. Every time we visited your facilities for cultural exchanges, every time you hired human technicians for maintenance work, every time you allowed human students to observe your operations, we learned something new. Lisa activated another display. This one showed a map of the galaxy with thousands of small red dots scattered across it. Each dot represented a human-planted device that was currently active. For 3 years, we have been leaving small presents behind wherever we went, Jake said. Most of them are just observation devices. Some can interfere with specific types of technology. A few can do more interesting things. The Rokari delegate, a being that looked like a walking boulder, spoke in a voice that sounded like grinding stone. The mining operations on our outer worlds have stopped responding. All of them. The Rokari use a lot of automated mining equipment, Jake noted. It turns out that equipment is vulnerable to certain types of interference. Do not worry, though. The disruption is temporary. Your workers have plenty of time to evacuate before anything dangerous happens. HFY was frantically coordinating with her military commanders. Our main fleet is reporting that their navigation systems are malfunctioning. They cannot plot accurate jump coordinates. Navigation systems are so important, Jake agreed. It would be terrible if a fleet tried to make a hyperspace jump with bad coordinates. They might end up very far from where they intended to go. They might even end up in empty space, far from any help. The implications of Jake's words sent a chill through the chamber. Getting lost in hyperspace was one of the most feared disasters in galactic travel. Ships could end up light years from civilization, with no way to call for help. You are holding the entire galaxy hostage, HFY accused. We are having a conversation, Jake corrected. A conversation about what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness, about what happens when you allow genocide and then blame the victims. Lisa received another message on her tablet and nodded to Jake. Admiral Karen Blake reports that Phase 2 is ready to begin. Phase 2? Brutok asked, though he sounded like he did not really want to know the answer. Jake smiled, but it was not a friendly expression. Phase 2 is where we show you what we could do if we were actually trying to hurt you. The chamber's main display changed again. This time it showed the Korthak homeworld. The planet looked normal from space, but as the image zoomed in, the delegates could see that something was wrong with the orbital defense network. Your homeworld's orbital defense platforms are experiencing some technical difficulties, Jake observed. All of them, at the same time. What an amazing coincidence. The display showed 12 massive space stations that protected the Korthak homeworld. Each one was armed with enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. But now they were all dark, powerless, drifting in orbit like dead metal. Those platforms have protected your world for over 1,000 years, Jake continued. Right now, they could not stop a single small ship from reaching your planet's surface. Brutok's rage was replaced by something that looked like fear. You would not dare attack a homeworld. That would violate every law of civilized warfare. We are not going to attack your homeworld, Jake said. We are simply demonstrating that we could if we wanted to. There is a difference. The display changed to show other homeworlds. Centauri Prime with its orbital defense grid completely offline. The Veltar core systems, with their automated defense fleets drifting powerlessly. The Ashanti homeworld, with its planetary shields flickering on and off randomly. Every major world in the galaxy is currently defenseless, Jake announced. Not because we have destroyed anything, but because we have turned off the systems that protect you. Species after species was shown in the same helpless state. Defense networks disabled, fleets immobilized, communication systems disrupted. The message was clear. Humanity could reach any target they wanted anywhere in the galaxy. This is impossible, HFY whispered. No one species could have this level of infiltration across the entire galaxy. You are right, Jake agreed. No normal species could do this, but humans are not normal. We are very good at adapting, learning, and planning ahead. We are also very good at being patient. Lisa stepped forward and spoke for the first time during the demonstration. For 3 years, every human who left Earth had specific instructions. Learn everything, map everything, prepare for everything. We hoped we would never need to use this information, but we were ready just in case. Your cultural Exchange programs made it easy, Jake added. You invited us into your most secure facilities because you thought we were harmless. You hired us for maintenance work because we were cheap labor. You let us attend your military academies because you wanted to show off your superior technology. The chamber was quiet now except for the soft sounds of delegates receiving reports from their homeworlds. The reports were all similar: widespread system failures, disabled defenses, and complete vulnerability to attack. We have made our point, Jake said. Every world in the galaxy now understands that human politeness was a choice, not a weakness. We chose to be diplomatic because we believed in the possibility of peaceful coexistence. He paused and looked around the chamber. But when you stood by and watched our children die, when you blamed us for our own genocide, you taught us that peace is not possible with species that do not respect the basic right to exist. Jake gathered his materials one final time. So now you have a choice. You can continue to treat humanity as a minor species that can be pushed around and ignored, or you can recognize that we are something else entirely. As Jake and Lisa walked toward the exit, the chamber remained in stunned silence. Delegates stared at their communicators, reading reports of the systematic neutralization of every major military force in the galaxy. At the door, Jake stopped and turned back. Oh, and council members? The Korthak fleet that bombed our colonies has been completely disabled. The crews are safe, but the ships are now space junk. Consider it a very small payment on the debt you owe for 8,000 human lives. After the humans left, the chamber erupted in panicked discussion. Military commanders across the galaxy were demanding explanations for failures that seemed impossible. Defense ministers were calling emergency meetings. The emergency session had been going on for 6 hours. The council chamber was filled with a tension that seemed to press down on every being present. Delegates huddled with their advisors, whispering urgent conversations into their communicators. Military reports kept coming in from across the galaxy, each one confirming what everyone already knew. Humanity had won. Not through conquest or destruction, but through something far more terrifying. They had simply turned off the galaxy's ability to defend itself. Every major fleet was disabled. Every defense network was offline. Every homeworld sat naked and vulnerable under the stars. Jake Morrison had returned to the chamber an hour ago, but he was no longer alone. Behind him stood 6 other humans, each wearing the same dark blue uniform but with different insignia. These were not diplomats. These were military officers, intelligence chiefs, and strategic planners. The people who had been working behind the scenes while Jake smiled and made polite conversation for 3 years. Admiral Karen Blake stood directly behind Jake's right shoulder. She was a tall woman with gray hair and cold blue eyes. Next to her was General Pete Hawkins, a broad-shouldered man whose scarred hands spoke of years of combat experience. Colonel Susan Walsh stood with perfect military posture, her dark skin and steady gaze making several alien delegates uncomfortable. The other humans were equally intimidating in their quiet professionalism. Captain Bobby Martinez, whose intelligence network had mapped every secret in the galaxy. Dr. Amanda Foster, whose biological research had found weaknesses in every known species. Lieutenant Colonel Jerry Watson, whose engineering teams had planted devices throughout galactic civilization. Vexhai looked at the human delegation with all 6 of her eyes. The council speaker who had seemed so powerful and important a week ago now looked small and frightened. "What do you want?" she asked finally. Jake stood up slowly. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet authority of someone who held absolute power and knew how to use it. "We want justice for our people," he said. "We want recognition of humanity's place in the galactic community. And we want to make sure that nothing like this ever happens again." "What does that mean exactly?" asked the Ashanti delegate, his large black eyes darting nervously between the humans. Admiral Blake stepped forward and activated a holographic display. The image showed a map of the galaxy with new boundaries marked in bright red lines. "These are the new territorial boundaries for human space," she announced. "All colonies and settlements within these borders are under human protection. Any military vessel that enters human space without permission will be disabled, and its crew returned home in escape pods." The boundaries encompassed far more space than humanity had ever claimed before. Systems that had been considered neutral territory were now marked as human-controlled. Several species found that their own trade routes now passed through what was being declared human space. "You cannot simply claim territory like this," Brutok protested, though his voice lacked its usual commanding tone. "There are laws, procedures, established claims." General Hawkins looked at the Korthek leader with the expression of a man who had seen too much violence in his life. "Hegemon Brutok, your forces murdered 8,000 human civilians 5 days ago. Your ships are currently drifting in space as useless metal. Your homeworld's defenses are offline. I would suggest that you are not in a position to discuss what we can and cannot do." Jake raised his hand slightly and the general stepped back. The gesture was small, but everyone in the chamber noticed it. Jake was clearly in command, and these dangerous-looking military officers followed his orders without question. "The territorial expansion is not negotiable," Jake said calmly. "But it is also not unreasonable. We are claiming systems that are either uninhabited or currently home to human settlements. We are not displacing any other species." Colonel Walsh activated another display. This one showed a list of new regulations for galactic commerce and military movement. Human merchant vessels will have free passage through all galactic trade routes, she announced. Human diplomatic missions will be granted the same status and protection as those of major galactic powers. Any species that interferes with human commerce or threatens human citizens will face immediate economic sanctions. "And if we refuse to accept these terms?" asked the Veltar delegate, clicking his mandibles nervously. Captain Martinez stepped forward with a slight smile that made several aliens uncomfortable. "Then your defense systems remain offline permanently. Your fleets stay disabled. Your communication networks continue to experience technical difficulties. Your choice." Implications were clear. Humanity was not asking for these concessions. They were stating the new reality and offering the other species a chance to adapt to it peacefully. Dr. Foster activated a third display, this one showing biological data. "We have also prepared several medical gifts for the galactic community," she said. "Cures for diseases that affect each of your species. Treatments for genetic conditions that have plagued your people for generations. Consider it a gesture of goodwill." Several delegates looked surprised. After the demonstrations of human military power, they had not expected offers of medical assistance. However, Dr. Foster continued, "These medical advances will only be shared with species that formally recognize human sovereignty and agree to the new territorial arrangements." Jake looked around the chamber, making eye contact with each major delegation. "We are offering you a choice. You can work with humanity as equals, or you can try to continue treating us as inferiors. But the days of ignoring human interests while expecting human cooperation are over." Vexhai activated her own communicator and spoke quietly with someone off-screen. After several minutes of urgent conversation, she turned back to the human delegation. "The Zentari Empire is prepared to recognize the new territorial boundaries," she announced. "In exchange, we request continued access to trade routes and formal diplomatic relations." Jake nodded. "Accepted. The Zentari Empire will receive preferred trading status and full access to human medical research." One by one, other species began to announce their acceptance of the new arrangements. The alternative was too frightening to consider. A galaxy where defense systems could be turned off at will was a galaxy where only humanity's enemies had reason to fear. But not everyone was ready to accept the new reality. Brutok stood up from his seat, his massive frame radiating defiance. "The Korthak hegemony will not bow to threats from a primitive species. We reject these demands. We will rebuild our fleets and reclaim our rightful position." The chamber fell silent. Everyone looked at Jake to see how he would respond to the first direct challenge to human authority. Jake looked at Brutok for a long moment. Then he turned to Admiral Blake and nodded slightly. "Admiral," Jake said quietly, "please show Hegemon Brutok the consequences of his decision." Admiral Blake activated her communicator. "Commander Scott Davis, execute Operation Final Answer." The chamber's main display changed to show the Korthak homeworld. For several seconds, nothing seemed to happen. Then, one by one, Every artificial light on the planet's night side went out. Cities plunged into darkness. Industrial facilities shut down. Transportation networks stopped working. The entire planetary civilization simply stopped functioning. The Korthak homeworld is now experiencing a complete technological shutdown, Admiral Blake announced calmly. No permanent damage has been done, but nothing electronic will work until we choose to turn it back on. Brutok stared at the screen in horror. His homeworld, which housed over 12 billion Korthak civilians, was now completely helpless. No power, no communication, no transportation, no life support for the underground cities. "This is genocide," he whispered. "No," Jake replied. "Genocide is what you did to our colonies. This is just turning off the lights. Your people have backup life support systems that will keep them alive for weeks, but they will be very uncomfortable until you change your mind." Jake looked around the chamber one final time. "Does anyone else wish to reject humanity's terms?" The silence was complete. Every species in the galaxy had just watched an entire planetary civilization shut down with a single command. The message was clear. Resistance was not just futile, it was pointless. "Excellent," Jake said. "Then let us discuss the details of our new relationship." Over the next 4 hours, the terms of galactic civilization's new structure were negotiated and finalized. Humanity would take its place as a major galactic power, with all the rights and protections that status entailed. The murder of human civilians would be treated as an act of war. Human territory would be respected and protected. In exchange, humanity would share its medical advances, provide defense assistance to allied species, and participate in galactic governance as an equal partner. As the session finally ended, delegates began filing out of the chamber. They carried with them the knowledge that the galaxy had changed forever. The small, polite species that had seemed so harmless 3 years. Ego was now the most powerful force in known space. Jake gathered his materials and prepared to leave. As he reached the door, Vex-High called out to him. "Ambassador Morrison," she said, "was this always your plan? Were you always intending to take control like this?" Jake turned back to her, and for the first time in days his expression showed some